Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome every one of you, including Andrew Ebel, Executive Creative Director, Magic Mango. Thank you so much, Andrew, for accepting our invitation and conducting this session. So today's session, we focus on the video piece. The video is one of the key elements of entry, FE entry. So there are a lot of things that you need to learn, but Andrew basically what going to cover is how to do a winning entry kit along with the video. So video is his key scope on this session. Let me hand over session to Andrew so he will take it forward.
Yeah, thanks, Gayan. Guys, I'm having slight internet connectivity issues, so I'm not going to put my camera on as I share my screen. If there is anything that you guys need to interrupt me and just say, please go ahead. Let me just begin by sharing the screen. Uh, First thing I will tell you guys is, sorry, can everybody just somebody just confirm that my screen can be seen and it is full screen?
Yeah, it is.
All right,
We can say
great.
it.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I'd like to say is, yeah, Gayan is very correct in saying that the video is a very important part of the entry. And I know Shehan and Jian did a very interesting session last week, or was it last week, that was quite interesting about how to enter as a whole. But telling you from a jury, a member of, I mean, I've been a member of juries in the past. The video is so important because 90% of what we look at the start is the video. It's only once the video sort of captures the jury's attention that you do move into actually reading that entry, and that entry is very long, right? So the most time is really spent with you have to sort of wow the jury at the start with your video, and only then, if it's interesting enough, does it actually go into the reading of the entries in detail, right? Not to say that we don't read all the entries, but yeah, that's why video is very important. And this session I like to call winning with video, because you can do it, right? It can be done, and I will go into how uh, how examples of great cases can uplift stories, etc. I'm going to go into this very fast. I know we already had a bit of a delay because we were waiting for some people. It's also sort of, I want to say, it's quite late for us to be having this session actually, because with our final deadline, what, 12 days from now, our videos should be maybe not complete, but at least fully scripted and fully sort of um, even storyboarded if needed, right? So I'm going to start with a very, very big question. And this is a question I'm assuming a lot of you have, because it is a question I get asked a lot by my own team, because we try to make more and more people involved with this process, which is something I recommend from all agencies. And the big question is this: FEs is all about results, right? That's what we've heard. It's in the name itself. It's about effectiveness. It's not necessarily a creative award show. It's about effectiveness. So the big question is, if FEs are all about results, how come you can't show results in the video? And this is a big concern to a lot of people, because obviously, I mean, we've all seen, I'm assuming we've all seen, the Cannes case films, we've seen the AdFest and Spikes, and even the Foes festival that we had earlier this year. It's almost like the peak or the climax of the video is sort of cut out, where you can't give them that wow moment where you show, your ad did, your sales went up 400%, even though your target was only 80%. That absolute climax of effectivity, we are not allowed to show in the video. And this is a big question that's on a lot of people's mind. But I want to reiterate something, which is something I tell everybody, right? This question may be on your mind, but the first thing you have to understand is, FEs is not all about results. Of course, effectiveness, results are very important. But one thing that is often missed, and you see a lot of random entries about consumer promos and stuff, and this is sort of the issue that people have. People don't understand that FEs is not all about results. FEs is about creativity, or a creative solution that drove the results. Now, I don't mean creativity is king here, but what I mean is, you need to show the jury, you need to show the judges, especially from your video how you had a problem and your solution, your campaign, what you did is what enabled those results to happen. Now, this may be a little confusing, so I'll use an example. And I'm going to use an example that will never happen because Apple is we all know Apple is not a brand that will ever give you a discount. Forget 80% off, they'll probably never give you a 2% off. But let's just imagine this hypothetical, lovely world where Apple is launching its newest phone. Let's call it the Apple 20 because I'm not sure which number we're up to now. Let's imagine Apple is launching the Apple 20 and it's the interactive offer is it's 80% off. So just imagine you're paying, whereas you would normally pay 300, 400,000 for this phone, you can now buy the Apple 20 for 60,000, right? If you have an offer like this, you may do a wacky campaign. But the truth is, even if Apple doesn't do a campaign and just puts out a post on their Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever it's called now, and just says all Apple 20 phones will be 80% off this week, sales will be through the roof because that people will be lining up to buy it, people will do these things. So just because you did a cool TV commercial or just because you did a cool campaign here, your result of showing, Apple phones were sold out in 5 hours is not really a result because that result could have been achieved by doing nothing basically, right? So that's where it's not just about results, but it's about creativity that drives the results. Now I will tell you, so this is what I'm talking about. Your results could be off the charts, but your creative contribution here is nothing. So in a position like this, you would not win an FE, even though you have all the results to show. Even though, somebody killed somebody else to get the last Apple, even though it's a hell of a result, that doesn't help you. That is just your offering. But you need to, especially in your video, you have to build a case to show how only your work could deliver these results. And I'll take the same example, right? There's Apple, this Apple is giving an 80% off. You need to make the jury feel the problem, right? Because Apple offering 80% off, there's zero problems, right? You immediately know, it doesn't matter what you do, Apple will sell out, the iPhone will sell out. So how do you make the jury sort of feel this problem? You have to frame your story in such a way. So like I said, we'll take the same example. Apple is 80% off. And just because you did a campaign, if you don't talk about it in the video, if you just say, oh, Apple wanted to launch their new phone, they were offering 80% off, and this is what we did, that is a terrible story. Nobody's going to fall for it. Nobody's going to believe you. Nobody's going to go with it. But what you can do is build a story around it, right? Your story could be built around this. Like anyone who knows anything about phones or anybody who's alive in the world basically knows that there's two types of people in the world. There are the Apple fanboys who will absolutely live and die by Apple, but there are also the anti-Apple people who are the Android people who will always, mock Apple for its, it's basically the same phone over and over again. We've heard all of this. But if you build your story around this and you talk about how Apple, everybody who loves Apple is an Apple fanboy, but there's also this untapped market of 50% of the world who are Samsung, who are all about LG, who are all about Xiaomi or whatever the Android is. And what if your story is about how our challenge was to transform or convert these Android lifers into Apple users? And then you show your campaign. That is an interesting story. And immediately that has us, or that has the jury interested in what you're saying. So it is basically the same thing you're saying. You're basically saying Apple offered 80% off. We did this ad. But now you're adding a layer of storytelling. And this layer of storytelling is extremely important in an FE case video. And I'll go into that a little bit more in detail later. But it is so important to sort of set this scenario. And then once you do this, let's say your result is not just about Apple selling out in 5 hours. Maybe all the Apple iPhones sold out in 5 hours. But you could even have a result that said 40% of phones were bought by people who had never owned an iPhone before. Or 40% of phones were bought by people who owned Android phones before. Immediately, you have a result that works perfectly with the story that you built. So your result won't come in your video, but you built the story in people's mind. So it's not like we are thinking, okay, who the hell, who cares what kind of what kind of TV commercial these guys did when they had an offer where the Apple was 80% off, because nobody's going to care that. But immediately you made a story around it. You brought us into this world where people are divided into two, which is the truth, right? And we all know this. We know that Apple, there are people who die for Apple, but there are also people who hate Apple. You immediately talk about this, and then your solution becomes how you transformed or how you converted an Android user into an Apple user. Immediately a bigger story, which immediately makes us interested in looking at what these results are. You obviously need the result to back it up, but storytelling is an absolutely key thing. So you make the jury feel the pain, you make the jury feel the problem by adding this layer of storytelling, and you amaze them with your solution. On that note, I will go straight into my next point. It is exceptionally important to tell the jury a story. Now, I used a very, very simple example earlier of this Apple, but I hope every one of you all noticed that it went from a straightforward thing saying we sold out to showing how we added a layer of story and got people actually thinking, oh, this is actually impressive. It's not just that the Apple people bought the Apple iPhones, it's people who would have never wanted to buy an Apple converted this. And it obviously would have been converted by the 80% discount. But forget about that. It was converted. You can always argue that we played a big role in it. Now you need to tell people a story. And the reason why is the jury goes through a hell of a lot of entries in a very short time. So the judging period is just 1 weekend, right? And there's so many entries. I'm not going to go into how many because it splits into different jury rooms, etc. But there's a lot of entries, right? And there's a lot of boring stuff to read. And I'm sorry to call this boring stuff, but you can imagine every entry being, I think it's 7 or 8 pages into 100 entries. That's 800 pages of things to read, right? And unfortunately, when it comes to the entry, there's a lot of stats you have to put in. There's a lot of jargon that you may be adding. But in the video, that is your chance to sort of entertain. Because when the jury is reading, or going through a lot of boring things, the jury really looks forward to the case films, because that is your sort of break from the mundane. There's the start of an opportunity for them to sort of unwind and sort of be entertained, right? It's why we like to look at the ads as well, right? Because it's the most entertaining part of it. So it's very important not to make your case video boring, right? And I have seen this in a lot of cases. People talk about, the background of the company, the background of the market situation. Yes, you have to set the context, but you don't set the context in such a boring way that people are like yawning halfway through it, because we want to see this is the hero of the day, and you need it to be exciting, engaging, and people to sort of understand that it's a story. You need to, like I said, unlike your case entry or the entry form, that will have a lot of facts, it'll have a lot of figures, it'll have a lot of graphs, jargon. You need to move away from this in the video. And I'm not sure who my audience here is, because I don't know how many of you all are parents, but I'm assuming everyone has had some sort of experience of being a storyteller, whether you're telling a story to a child before putting them to sleep. Maybe it could be your children or your niece, nephew, brother, sister. It could be even, we're all creative people, or we're all advertising people. It could be the stories we are telling to clients, how we sell our ideas. You're never going to do it in a very boring way. And I'm going to tell you all a story in 2 ways right now. First, I'm going to tell it to you in the most boring way possible, right? I'm going to tell you all this story using facts, using figures, using marketing jargon or business jargon that people don't just connect with, right? Very simply, imagine this. There's a parent company that divested 3 of its subsidiary companies. Now, these subsidiary companies, which were earlier part of this big conglomerate and doing well on the big name of the parent company, now needs to sort of find a better solution to improve their product to basically stand out from competition, right? And let's imagine subsidiary A, they typical any business really, all over the world we see this. Subsidiary A basically decided to cut corners. They wanted the cheapest, the quickest solution that they could, because they want to get to market fast, right? And the problem is the competition was just too strong. It just killed that product basically, right? Kill that company, ate it up basically. Subsidiary B, they were not as bad as subsidiary A. They did a little bit more research. and they may probably made a slightly better product, but they still didn't really want to waste too much time, and more importantly, they didn't want to waste too much money. So they did a above average product. But again, it's a very competitive market, and the competition was too strong for it and destroyed it. And then you take subsidiary C. Basically, they did an in-depth feasibility study. They allocated sufficient resources, and despite there being high costs upfront, they invested in a solution that basically promised them long-term sustainability. Now you are hearing a lot of words here that we all know and we've all heard, we've seen in briefs definitely, but these are not entertaining words. Right now, subsidiary C, since they did everything, they withstood every sort of thing that the competition threw at them. Right now, this story has been extremely boring because it has a lot of, it has a lot of straightforward jargon or straightforward. There's no storytelling aspect to this, right? And if you put yourselves in the shoes of a parent, can you even imagine telling this story to a young boy or girl who's just trying to go to sleep? They might fall asleep from boredom, or they might hit you with their nearest soft toy, right? But if you add a layer of storytelling to this very story, isn't this story the story of the three little pigs? A story that if you tell any child at bedtime, they'll love it, right? You will add your voices, you will add your drama, but it is the same thing. It is the mother pig telling the three little pigs to leave. And as they looked for new places to live, one went with straw because it was the cheapest and fastest. One went with wood because it was also fast and whatever, but both of them were obviously huffed and puffed and blown down by the wolf. But then you get that subsidiary C, which is the third pig, who actually spent time building his house with brick and mortar. And that was what the wolf couldn't blow down. So again, it just shows you how you can tell a story in the worst possible way. But in a way, I don't know when the Three Little Pigs was written. I think it's a Brothers Grimm story. Must have been thousands of years or hundreds of years. It's still living today. It still entertains children all over the world. And that is the power of a story. And this brings me immediately into my third point. Every hero needs a villain, right? The Three Little Pigs wouldn't have been much of a story if the big bad wolf didn't come and blow their house down. So every hero needs a villain. And let's take it into pop culture. Batman, he needed Joker, he needed Bane, he needed whoever else he battled. The Avengers needed Thanos. Simba needed Scar, right? And the reason for this is, and this is something that you'll see in every movie pretty much, right? It's that the villain makes you root for the hero. So you need to paint this picture where you have a villain in your story. And this villain, you need to tell the jury who this villain is. And the jury needs to hate this guy in order to make them root for you. So that is again part of your storytelling. It's how you can sort of push this. Now, when I say villain, I know I've gone into a lot of fantasy sort of examples here, or movie sort of examples. I don't mean that. Your villain could be a competitor, and this is probably the most common thing we see uh, in in the FE's case videos and case studies that we see. I mean, if you're Munchie, Maliban could be the villain in your story. I mean, if you're Coke, it could be Elephant House, etc. Very, very, very common. Basically, across any industry, you could do this. It could also be the government, because we know, I think, as advertisers, we know that even next year, I think there's yet another uh, sort of policy being put in place where you can't use children under a certain age in advertising. So obviously, even that is an interesting problem to have. So then immediately, you're a toffee brand and you can't use children in advertising. Immediately, that's a villain, right? So then your solution shows how you manage to circumvent, or how you manage to challenge this problem in a creative way. It could be, obviously, I'm sure we'll see a lot of entries like this even this year. We've seen this in the last couple of years. COVID could be the issue. The economic crisis that has been going around could be the issue. The petrol issue. All these are villains, right? And these are villains that obviously we all connect to because we all suffer through COVID. We all suffer through this economic crisis. I mean, we all got on the streets for whatever it was worth at the time. So we have all these crises and these problems, these villains that in our lives. Interestingly, I want you to think that your villain could also be yourself. And I know this sounds a little weird, but if you were to imagine this, let's say Dettol wants to get into the beauty soap space. Now, Dettol is immediately, when you say Dettol, uh, forget soap. What immediately comes to mind is the Dettol liquid that we use to, I mean, do everything from clean wounds to even clean stains on your house, on your home, etc. Right? It's all about protection, right? Even Dettol soap talks about, germ killing protection, etc. So if Dettol wants to get into the beauty space, that's immediately a barrier in itself, because they are battling against everything Dettol has built over the last few or last decades in this country. So immediately the jury sees, oh, Dettol is actually facing a problem, and they are sort of interested in what you have done to make people actually see it as a beauty brand. You really need to basically create this villain in order to make the jury see and feel that, oh yes, this there was a campaign needed to solve this problem. It is not a small problem that basically, like I said, the Apple 80% off, it's not a small problem that didn't need advertising. It is a problem that definitely needed advertising, that's definitely needed a creative solution to flip the switch. With that, I'll move to part 4, which is something, again, I think is quite important to a lot of people, because this is something that happens to all of us. And I like to title this called What Not to Do When Your Campaign is Amazing. And I know I've said especially here because it's something you should not do anyway, but the trap really happens when your campaign is available. Just because you think your campaign is amazing doesn't mean everyone, and when I say everyone, it doesn't mean the jury will think it's amazing. At least not at first start, not at first look, right? And this is a quote that I have from Guan Ting He, who was the print jury chairman at the 4As festival this year, and I think is no stranger to the Sri Lankan advertising community. He's a creative head who has worked around the sort of Southeast Asia region. He's been here on multiple occasions speaking. And he said this one, which was very interesting, very eye opening for me about how global jurors look at things. And he said, average work with a great case film will always beat great work with an average case study, right? And this is not to tell you to get away with doing average work, but this is to tell you that you need to give your best work the best opportunity to win. Because too often we know, all the things that we've gone through to create this piece of work, and we think, oh, this is a sure winner, right? This is an absolute winner. It's a beautiful ad. It has 100% sales increase, blah, blah, blah. We don't think much about this. And we think, okay, this is going to win easily. Let's just enter it across this thing. We'll not think too much about it. We'll do a straightforward whatever, right? But even though we know it's a sure winner, the jury doesn't. So the problem is, if you don't put the effort to make the jury see what you see, they are not going to see it. And if you do a very basic video or a very basic thing on the one that you think is a sure winner, you're not going to win, right? Because we don't understand, or the jury doesn't understand the backstory. The jury doesn't understand, how much hours you put into it. You don't understand how difficult the shoot was. We don't understand any of that unless you tell us. We don't understand the context unless you tell us. So it's very, very important to set the context. You need the jury to understand your pain. You need the jury to understand, damn, this is really a problem. And then you need the jury to think, oh, so this is how they solved it. And that is the wow moment that we need to feel in the video. Because this part, you can say in the video. You set the context, you make them feel your pain by showing the challenge, and then you wow them with your insight and idea. You may not be able to show results here. Hopefully the results will wow us further when it comes to looking at the entry, the entry form. But in your video, what you can do is think, damn, this was a real problem. And it's a super solution that I would have never thought of. Or even if I would have thought of it, this is the perfect solution. And that's what your video has to do. So I would like to encourage everybody, and I'm assuming most people have multiple entries, spend the most time on the entries you feel are the strongest. Now, this seems like a very obvious statement, but as I said before, A lot of the time we think, okay, this is the obvious winner, let's just knock this off and then spend time to try and lift up the others. But don't do that. By all means, please spend time to lift up others, but you must put the most time into the entries you feel are the strongest. And when I say the most time, I mean on video, I mean script, I mean rescript, bounce it off as many people as possible. All those things are very needed, right? You need to bounce the video once you do it of people who aren't close to the work, and at every stage. Do it at script stage, do it at storyboard stage, do it at the first cut stage. This is very important, especially to show it to people who are not involved. Ideally, even if you have connections outside your agency that you can talk to, who you can trust, do it, because it's very important to sort of speak to those who don't know the case, who are coming into it absolutely cold, to see if they understand what you're trying to say and to see what they actually say. Because we have a big problem on a creative space, and this is one of my favorite memes, guys, which is why I'm sharing. A lot of creatives have this problem. A lot of, I don't think, okay, when I say creatives, I don't mean the creative department. I mean the people in this creative field that we're in. We don't like, when we are very happy with something, we don't like to show it to people and get feedback. Right? We are very upset that when we are so happy about something and the other guy is like, yeah, it's okay. We end up looking like this otter who's hugging our piece of work and very upset. But you must show it, right? And this is true of obviously of work as well. But in a entry video case, show it to as many people as possible. Don't show it to 100,000 people, but show it to a few trusted people, as many trusted people as possible. Get their feedback. Ask them what are they not understanding, and do that, because you'd rather hit this roadblock before entering your video than actually when you do enter it and you don't want the jury to be like, yeah, cool, and change the subject and move to the next entry. So that is what you need to do. My final sort of thing, I think I skipped a part, I mean, on my script slides. Just a few tips. I wanted to keep this short because I know it's a bit late already. A few other tips that I have. It's very important, and I think this is something Jian and Shehan also spoke about. It's very, very important to start with a bang, right? You don't, it, and this all comes back to telling a story as opposed to talking about jargon, because we see a lot of videos starting with, you know, during COVID, Munchie sales went down by 16% because people couldn't afford biscuits. Yes, we know that. And we know that, right? And you may have to say that at some point. But you have to start with a bang with some amazing discount. Saying, did you know that biscuits were the hero of COVID? Or how do you think a biscuit became a hero of COVID? Just something to sort of make us sit back and listen. Because otherwise, the chances are you will tune out, right? The more boring it is at the start, the more you will tune out. So try and tell a story, and try and tell a story where your first chapter or the first line in your story is amazing. The second thing I'll say is get the right voices, right? And this comes down to possibly spending as well. You may have to revoice on occasion. You may have to recast once you voice it and think, oh no, it's not working. The problem here, I think, is obviously I know we are all in the same boat here. When it comes to voicing FE entries or award entries in general, we use in-house voices because I mean we're all like dramatic people in this industry. So clearly you may have one or two people who can voice. But the problem is when you have 13 entries and it's the same voice, again, it gets monotonous. So it's very important to get the right voice for the right case. Some may need a young girl, some may need an old man, and some may need something in the middle. So it's very important to think about these things as well, because these are almost always afterthoughts. Voicing and music, I would should also put in here, is something definitely that you need to look at, something that you definitely need to take into consideration. I would also advise you to be honest uh, with both results and objectives. I know, having been in the industry for so long, I've entered so many different award shows. We are all probably slightly guilty of fudging results here and there. I'm not condoning it, nor am I condemning it, but you need to be honest, because, like I said, just like me, everybody in this jury will be either advertisers who have entered these awards before, or at least have a knowledge of the market, or it will be marketers who have in-depth knowledge of different markets, right? You will be more impressed thinking, okay, the results are not bad, but the creativity is good and the idea is good and the problem was big enough to do this thing, then for us to think, oh, no bloody way was this the right thing. No bloody way did, the was the objective to increase results by 17.3%, and the result was that we increased it by 48%, right? We are not going to believe that. So make sure you try to be as honest as possible uh, with both these things, just for your own sake. I would also like to tell this to everybody, which is another important thing. Don't overthink everything. Like I said, share your case videos with other people who are not involved. But if people seem to like it, just because it's boring, just because just because it's simple, just because it was the first take, if people like it and everybody seems to like it, don't worry about it, right? Just go for it, because even the simplest videos can be, as long as it tells your story, right? I will just say 2 years ago, or was it 3 years ago, I think, we had a long list at our agency of what to enter, and one of the entries was cut off. But on the day before submitting, actually, it was literally the day before submitting, or I think it was a midnight submission, and at 11 a.m., we said, no, let's enter this. We did a video in an hour, if anything, and actually that ended up winning an FE Silver, right? So you can't really be sure about what will win and what will not win. But your video can be simple. It doesn't always have to be extremely complicated, right? Especially when you're doing a lot of videos, you're going to have to look for sort of simple sort of solutions and all that. So don't worry about simplicity or not. Anything, it can be anything as long as it tells your story. Don't ever think, oh, this is too simple for FEs. So with that, I will summarize, and then if there are any questions, you can ask me. Don't just worry about results, especially in the video, because you can't say results, but worry about building a problem, making people feel that there's a real problem, and then showing how your solution was the best solution. This comes down to storytelling. So you need to tell a captivating story. People are waiting. Like I said, the jury is waiting to be entertained a little bit, because you're reading a lot of boring stuff. We want to be entertained. So please entertain us. Tell a captivating story, tell a very entertaining story, tell a story that we can resonate with, even if we are not in that TG. Maybe it's something that immediately your story makes us feel, oh, okay, there are people like that. Yeah, that's interesting. That's what we want to feel, right? And that's what you want us to feel as well as a jury, because if you feel that, immediately we are sort of on your side. Which brings me to this. You create your villain, paint your villain beautifully. Don't take too long to do it, but definitely create your villain. Like I said, it could be anything from a competitor to the economic crisis, or anything in between. It could be yourself either. And then be the hero, right? When I say be the hero, your brand doesn't have to be the hero. Your campaign has to be the hero. Your campaign is what defeated this villain. Your campaign is Batman. Work, great work, isn't good enough to win on its own. You need the backing of a great video. You need the backing of a great entry case written. Take the most time on your best pieces of work, right? There are a lot of agencies I know that try to enter as many as possible, so that it's almost like a machine gun approach. But sometimes the sniper approach works even better. If there's something that you think is an absolute beautiful piece of work, make your case film just as beautiful as that piece of work. Finally, voicing is important. Honesty when it comes to numbers, your objectives, your actual challenges. Remember, these are people who do know the markets as well. And don't overthink, even though I might have just been telling you all how much to think about. Don't overthink it too much. Uh, all you need to do is build this story and just wow. And as a final point, I'll just tell you, don't worry if you don't win, whether you're a first time entrant or a 100th time entrant. Anyone who ever enters advertising awards wherever in the world, except maybe Droga, loses more time than they win. Because for every gold award or silver award or bronze award you see, there are so many that didn't make the cut or were just finalists or whatever, right? So don't be disheartened. Keep working. Uh, keep doing great work. Keep doing great videos. And obviously your medals will come soon. I think that is it for me. If there are any questions, I can take them now.
Thank you, Andrew. Simple yet very interesting session. To the point, what we should focus, what we should not focus. If there are any question from the forum, we can open it now. There are some messages are coming in. Okay, there's a lengthy message. Let me read it out. As per your session, it's clear the video should be case video, but the entry form specifies as a creative reel. Entry form also mentions the following. Because judges are required to read the written case before the reviewing the creative work, the creative reel should focus on creative examples. The reel is not meant to be a video version of written case. Judges are eager to view the work after reading the case. Any comment on it, Andrew?
Yeah. So, sorry, this is from Angelika, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So, I think a few years ago, again, we were only allowed to submit creative reels. And I think Gayan and Slim team may have to weigh in on this as well at the end. It changed a few years ago where we were allowed to make it a case film, right? And it is, I do understand this is written here, but I believe the truth is the opposite because we've been part of these before. You do need to tell a compelling story with your visual, because if it was just a matter of showing your cases, showing your pieces, it doesn't sort of connect with your audience, right? So you have to set the stage before you show what you did. So I'm sorry if there is a disconnect between what is said on the form and what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is the practical issues that we, or the practical way of how judging is done, and the practical way of how entries are actually created by, I mean, my agency and all the other agencies that I've ever been a part of, really. But Gayan, I don't know if you want to talk about this, whether you all are sure about this, because I didn't realize the entry form still talks about this creative reel, because Angelika and everybody else here, a few years ago, it was the case where you had to just say TV, show your TV commercial, radio, play your radio commercial, but now it's not. And I suppose different juries work in different ways, where some may read the cases first, some may watch the videos first. But even if you read the cases first, Angelica and everybody here, the jury is not going to read word by word every case throughout before going into the video. So if you want your case to stand out, the video is very, very important from a practical
Uh,
point of view. Yeah.
as you said correctly, Andrew, in the practical perspective, so how we should win a case, how we should win a entry FE award is depending on many factors. One way would be having a very compelling video, how you put everything together, in compelling story of your entry projected through the video. I think that is what you were trying to explain to us, the importance of having these key points, projected in a video itself. The format of, the jury process might, change, might go here and there, but the overall approach will be remain same. The point that we allocated, how people would think in practically, so how they can be convinced by a video, it's remained
Yeah.
as same, whether it's viewed first or last.
Yeah.
So
So
video
Angelica,
is something.
sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead, guy.
yeah, video is something you have a better chance of getting everyone's attraction. As you said, everyone would not like to read through, lengthy documents. So video is it's a great opportunity for everyone to attract the juries.
Yeah.
So that's my point of view.
Yeah. So Angelica, I would think the bare minimum would be to have your video being a creative reel. But like I said, I'm trying to give you, I think that's why we're doing this session, because I can give you a more practical perspective on it. When it comes to juries, we do look forward to these videos, right? So if your video is just a series of creative executions, while that is okay as a basic video, it may not entertain us as much, and we may not also understand why you did this ad. So your ad might be nice, but if you don't do this video where it sets the context, it might fall flat. So just to safeguard yourself, give yourself the best chance to do it, I would advise you to do it as a story, as like you said, I mean, like you said it here, a video version of the written case. I wouldn't even call it a video version of a written case, but the more exciting version of showing your written case is what I would advise you to do. Yeah. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with you sending only the creative reel, except that you are probably standing in your own way there. But from a requirement point of view, that's all that's required as a minimum. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? So otherwise we can close the session. Okay, then let's close the session. We have 9 more days to submit. So 14 is the closing day for this year's program, and this is going to be the last workshop that we are going to have for this year's program. This is a workshop number 3. So we had 2 before. So if someone has missed it already, you can go into our LinkedIn page and have a look on them. Then let's close the workshop now. Thank you very much for joining the session, and thank you, Andrew, again for a wonderful session.